The engine groaned as William Perth gripped the steering wheel, vibrations rattling through his hands. He'd chosen this particular vehicle deliberately, a relic from his company's fleet, barely holding together. The irony wasn't lost on him. As CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in the country, he'd built an empire on efficiency and innovation. Yet here he was, bouncing along a pothole-riddled rural road, feeling every jolt of a system he thought he understood. William had always prided himself on being a hands-on leader. He'd started from the bottom, or so he liked to tell himself. But the truth was it had been years since he truly connected with the day-to-day realities of his business. Lately, whispers of discontent had reached his ears. Rumors of overworked drivers, unsafe conditions, and a growing disconnect between the corporate office and the people who kept the wheels turning. So he'd made a decision. Disguised in a worn flannel shirt, scuffed boots, and a cap pulled low over his eyes, William had become Bill, a new hire taking on a rural delivery route. It was supposed to be a fact-finding mission, a way to see the cracks in the system firsthand. But as the truck's engine sputtered and died on a lonely stretch of road outside Brooksville, William realized he might have bitten off more than he could chew. The sun was dipping low, casting shadows across the fields as William climbed out of the cab. He kicked the tire in frustration. No signal on his phone, no other cars in sight, just the endless stretch of road. He grabbed his duffel bag and started walking. About a mile down the road, he spotted a flickering neon sign. Brooksville Diner and Motel. The place looked like it had seen better days, its paint peeling and windows fogged with age. William pushed open the door, the bell jingling overhead, and stepped into the warm, greasy air of the diner. A young woman behind the counter looked up, her expression a mix of surprise and curiosity. She couldn't have been more than 30, with tired eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Her name tag read Lori. "You lost?" she asked, her voice tinged with amusement. "You could say that," William replied, forcing a smile. "Truck broke down a ways back. Any chance you've got a mechanic in town?" Lori shook her head. "Closest one's in Millerton, about 20 miles east. But old Joe might be able to take a look in the morning. He's got a shop out by the highway." William sighed. "Guess I'm stuck here for the night then." Lori gestured to a booth by the window. "Sit down. I'll get you some coffee. You look like you need it." As William slid into the booth, he couldn't help but notice the diner's worn charm. The cracked vinyl seats, the faded photos on the walls, the faint smell of bacon and coffee. It was a far cry from the boardrooms and luxury hotels he was used to, but there was something oddly comforting about it. Lori returned with a steaming mug of coffee and a slice of pie. "On the house," she said with a small smile. "You look like you've had a rough day." William thanked her, struck by her kindness. As they talked, he learned that Lori had been working at the diner for years, ever since her husband passed away. She'd been left with nothing but debt and a mountain of bills, and the diner was the only thing keeping her afloat. "I've got dreams, you know," she said, her voice softening. "I'd love to open my own place someday. A little cafe where people can come and feel at home. But right now, it's just survival." William listened, his chest tightening with a mix of guilt and admiration. He'd spent years focused on profit margins and shareholder meetings, but here was someone who embodied the very essence of resilience. And yet her struggles were a stark reminder of the people his company had failed. People like Lori who deserved better. As the night wore on, William found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected. He told Lori about his own struggles, carefully omitting his true identity, and shared stories of his early days in the business. When Lori offered him a room at the motel for the night, William accepted gratefully. As he lay in the narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that this detour was more than just a breakdown. It was the beginning of something he couldn't yet name. The morning sun filtered through the thin curtains. William woke to the sound of distant chatter and the clatter of dishes from the diner. When he stepped inside, Lori was behind the counter, her hands busy with a coffee pot. "Morning," she said, pouring him a cup. "Joe's on his way. He'll take a look at your truck, but don't get your hopes up. That old thing might be beyond saving." When Joe arrived, a grizzled man with grease-stained hands, William followed him out to the truck. The mechanic poked around under the hood, muttering to himself. "She's seen better days," Joe said finally. "I can patch her up enough to get you to Millerton, but you're going to need a real mechanic to get her back on the road for good." William nodded, though the delay grated on him. He wasn't used to being at the mercy of others. But as he went back to the diner, he realized this might be an opportunity. A chance to dig deeper into the life he'd only glimpsed the night before. Lori was clearing tables when he returned. William hesitated, then grabbed a rag and began helping her wipe down the counters. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know," William replied, "but I want to." When the breakfast rush died down, Lori gestured for William to join her in a booth. As they ate, Lori began to open up. She told him about her husband, a truck driver who'd worked long hours to provide for their family. He'd been fired unexpectedly, accused of a mistake that wasn't his fault, and the stress had taken its toll. He'd passed away just a year later. "He worked for Perth Logistics," she said, her voice steady but laced with bitterness. "They didn't care about him, just another number to them." William's stomach churned, though he kept his expression neutral. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That shouldn't have happened." Lori shrugged, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "It is what it is. I just wish things had been different." William wanted to tell her the truth, to reveal who he was and promise to make things right. But he couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he asked about her dreams, about the cafe she'd mentioned. Her face lit up as she described her vision. A cozy space with mismatched chairs and a menu filled with comfort food. "It's probably just a pipe dream," she admitted. "But it keeps me going, you know?" William nodded, though his mind was already racing. He thought about the resources at his disposal, the changes he could make. But more than that, he thought about Lori. Her resilience, her kindness, her quiet determination. She deserved more than just survival. Later that afternoon, as Joe worked on the truck, William found himself wandering the town. Brooksville was small, its streets lined with weathered buildings and faded signs. By the time he returned to the diner, the truck was running barely. Joe warned him not to push it too hard. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, William sat in the diner with Lori, the two of them sharing a quiet moment. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. This town, this woman, had changed him in ways he couldn't yet understand. The truck's engine rattled as William drove back to Brooksville after a brief trip to Millerton for repairs. The mechanic there had managed to get it running, but the vehicle still felt held together by sheer willpower as he pulled into the diner's parking lot. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Lori's story had burrowed deep into his conscience, and the guilt he felt was no longer something he could ignore. Later that afternoon, Lori's brother Tom stopped by the diner. He was a truck driver like Lori's late husband, and his presence was a stark reminder of the world William had been trying to understand. Tom was in his early 40s, with a weathered face and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. William introduced himself as Bill and struck up a conversation. Tom was hesitant at first, but soon he was sharing stories of life on the road. The long hours, the poor pay, the constant pressure to meet impossible deadlines. "It's not just the job," Tom said, his voice tinged with frustration. "It's the way they treat us, like we're disposable. You make one mistake and you're out. No second chance." William listened, his stomach twisting with every word. He thought about the policies he'd signed off on, the decisions he'd made from the comfort of his office. He'd never considered the human cost. Not really. That night, William lay awake in his motel room, the weight of his thoughts keeping sleep at bay. He thought about the people who'd been let down by his company, the policies he'd implemented, the profits he'd prioritized over people. By morning, he'd made a decision. He found Lori at the diner, her hands busy with the morning prep. "I need to tell you something," William said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. Lori set down the knife she'd been using and wiped her hands on her apron. "Okay," she said slowly. "What is it?" William took a deep breath. "I'm not who you think I am. My name isn't Bill. It's William. William Perth." Lori's eyes widened, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. As in the CEO of Perth Logistics? William nodded. Yes, I came here to see what life was like for our drivers, for people like you. And what I've seen, it's changed me. For a moment, Lori just stared at him. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. A short, incredulous sound. You've got to be kidding me. I'm not, William said, his voice earnest. I know I don't deserve your trust, but I want to make things right, starting with you. He explained his plan to offer her a remote job with the company, one that would give her the stability and opportunity she deserved. He also promised to overhaul the company's policies, starting with fairer treatment for drivers and better support for their families. Lori listened in silence, her arms crossed over her chest. When he finished, she shook her head. You think this fixes everything? A job and a few policy changes? No, William admitted. But it's a start. And I'm not going to stop until I've made things right. Lori studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Then slowly, she nodded. Okay, I'll take the job. But don't think this means I trust you. William smiled, though his heart ached with the weight of her words. I don't expect you to, but I'm going to earn it. The drive back to the city was a blur of highways and rest stops. When he finally arrived at the corporate office, the gleaming glass building felt alien to him. He walked through the lobby with a newfound purpose, ignoring the curious glances of his staff. His assistant Claire was waiting for him in his office. Mr. Perth, are you? I'm fine, William interrupted. He softened his voice. Call an emergency board meeting and get me the latest reports on driver retention, payroll, and employee grievances. Claire blinked, clearly thrown by the urgency in his voice. Right away, sir. As she hurried out, William sank into his chair and began drafting a proposal. The words came easily, fueled by the faces he'd seen in Brooksville. Lori, Tom, the countless others who'd been let down by his company. The board meeting was tense. William stood at the head of the table, his proposal projected on the screen behind him. He outlined his plan: increased wages for drivers, better benefits, a revamped grievance system, and a commitment to reinvesting profits into improving working conditions. The room was silent when he finished. Finally, one of them spoke up. This is ambitious, but the cost is necessary? William interrupted, his voice firm. We've been prioritizing profits over people for too long. It's time to change that. The debate that followed was heated, but William held his ground. He spoke of Lori, of her husband, of the countless employees who'd been failed by the company. And slowly, reluctantly, the board began to come around. When the meeting adjourned, William felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't a complete victory. There were still details to iron out, but it was a start. Back in his office, William called Lori. It's done, he said without preamble. The board approved the changes. You'll be getting a formal offer soon, but I wanted to tell you myself. There was a long pause. When Lori finally spoke, her voice was soft. Thank you. William leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. Don't thank me yet. There's still a lot of work to do. Over the next few weeks, William threw himself into implementing the changes. He met with drivers, listened to their concerns, and worked tirelessly to address them. The company's culture began to shift as employees started to believe that their voices mattered. Lori's remote job began, and though she was initially hesitant, she quickly proved herself to be an invaluable asset. Her insights into the challenges faced by drivers helped shape policies in ways William never could have anticipated. One evening, as William sat in his office reviewing reports, Claire knocked on the door. There's someone here to see you, she said, her tone uncharacteristically hesitant. Who is it? Before Claire could answer, Lori stepped into the room. She looked out of place in the sleek modern office, but there was a quiet confidence in her eyes that made William smile. Lori, he said, standing. What are you doing here? She crossed her arms, her expression serious. I wanted to see this place for myself. See if the changes you promised are real. William gestured to the chair across from his desk. Have a seat. I'll show you everything. For the next hour, William walked Lori through the new policies, the employee feedback system, the plans for improving working conditions. She listened intently, asking pointed questions and offering suggestions. By the end of the meeting, even she seemed impressed. As she stood to leave, William hesitated. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for giving me a chance to make things right." Lori studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're welcome. But don't think this means I'm done holding you accountable." William smiled. "I wouldn't expect anything less." After she left, William sat back in his chair, a sense of quiet satisfaction settling over him. The road ahead was long, and there would undoubtedly be challenges along the way. As the city lights twinkled outside his window, William thought about the miles he'd traveled, not just on the road, but within himself. He'd started this journey as a man disconnected from the world he was supposed to serve. But now, thanks to a broken-down truck and a chance encounter in a small town, he was finally beginning to understand what it meant to lead with purpose.